Introducing Meta Ray-Ban Display, the world's most advanced AI glasses. With a full color display built into the lens of the glasses, it's there when you need it and gone when you don't. Send and receive messages, translate or caption live conversations, collaborate with Meta AI, and more. Be one of the first to try Meta Ray-Ban Display. Visit meta.com/Meta Ray-Ban Display to book a demo and find your pair.
To wish you, all the staff in Parliament, every member and their families across the House a very happy Christmas. And a little festive advice to those in reform. If mysterious men from the East appear bearing gifts, this time report it to the police. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues.
Welcome to Quiet Riot, the politics podcast that's more widow twanky than wicked queen. I'm Alex Andreou.
And I'm Naomi Smith, the closest thing this show has to buttons, with a hefty dose of Ice Queen thrown in.
We are the politics podcast that helps you let it go, rather than worrying it's behind you all the time.
So kick off your glass slipper, pour yourself a glass of holiday cheer, and join us for a festive, quiet riot.
Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot. I'm Alex, a mixture of Peter Pan and Tinkerbell, here only because you continue to believe.
And I'm Naomi, part Rapunzel, part Good Fairy.
And I'm producer Kenny, forever wishy-washy.
I see you more as a Baron Hardup.
No, you don't.
Yes, I do.
All right, you pair of Dick Whittingtons, hush.
Talking of streets that are paved with gold, if you're still feeling generous, a gentle reminder that only you can keep this show on the road by heading over to ko-fi.com/quietriotpod, where you can support us for the price of a mulled wine.
Now, back in podcast land, this week we'll be looking at democracy under duress after the government announced an independent review into foreign interference, which took everyone by surprise, primarily by virtue of the fact that the government seems to be doing something assertive, sensible and popular.
Plus, in a week when the head of MI6 warns that Europe is in a state between peace and war, can European leaders find a narrow path between national interest and international security that galvanises our continent rather than paralyses it? To help us, we have none other than our favourite regular voice of reason and pragmatism. It's Annette Dittert. Welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to see that we're all in this kind of festive spirit. As a German, I particularly cherish the pre-Christmas time.
Yeah.
Do you know, when we were talking about who we're going to get for the last regular episode of the year, we said it's got to be listeners' favourite person.
Oh, that's so kind.
That is true.
Thank you. Really appreciate that.
Now, on to matters more serious. Eurovision. Okay, it may seem an odd topic for a politics show, but this year it has been even more political than usual, with countries threatening to boycott next year's if Israel is allowed to take part, and the German Chancellor calling that position scandalous. The German state broadcaster, SWR, has tried to pour oil on troubled waters by saying that the contest is organized by broadcasters, not governments, and expressing confidence that the EBU will find a solution. Are you as confident?
I don't know, really. I mean, this is actually, my company, the state broadcaster, SWR, is part of ARD. I think they're right in that it shouldn't become too political in a way. And of course, a German state broadcaster would express confidence in having Israel in this contest. I mean, we have our history with this. I personally think that this shouldn't have been this kind of war over this. I think this has been wrong.
But didn't Israel politicise it by rigging the votes last year? That's the point. So I think all countries agree this should be above politics. It's a way to unite countries, separately from whether their governments get along with each other.
But that wasn't really the reason. I mean, that was one of the points that came up, but it was mostly for political reasons. And I mean, I think, so many countries have rigged this vote over the years. I mean, it's not a serious contest anyway. No, I think it has been a political issue. And I mean, you can say what you like, but I mean, you can talk negatively with all good reasons. And many Jews do that on the Israeli government. But I don't think you should ban a country with all the civil protesters against their government in that country from a contest. So I'm in that regard, I'm quite with my
I see. So in a way, it would encourage the conflation of Netanyahu equals Israel equals all Jewish people.
And that's why I personally do not think this is right to ban them from that.
Quiet Riot. Western liberal democracies are under huge pressure, both individually and collectively, both domestically and from external actors, both from foes and supposed friends. Here's looking at you, America. This calls for a more dynamic shift, a more muscular defence. As always with such things, the best time to shift to that stance was years ago. The second best time is right now. This conduct is a stain on our democracy, Housing and Community Secretary Steve Reed told the Commons this week as he launched an urgent review into foreign financial interference in UK politics. This review, he promised, will remove that stain.
The facts are clear. A British politician took bribes to further the interests of the Russian regime, a regime which forcefully deported vulnerable Ukrainian children and killed a British citizen on British soil using a deadly nerve agent. This conduct is a stain on our democracy. The independent review will work to remove that stain.
We know a bit about what this review will be and a lot about what it won't be. It will be led by retired civil servant Sir Philip Rycroft. It will report in about 4 months' time in March 2026, and it will be forward-looking, meaning, in Reed's words, it will not seek to relitigate past electoral events. It won't be focused on or try to make findings about parties or individuals, but rather try to uncover the routes via which global adversaries like Russia, China and Iran seek to influence our politics and recommend ways to close or impede those routes urgently. Now, this all comes during a 2-week period that has seen eye-catching speeches about undoing the damage of Brexit, an announcement about reforming BBC governance, rejoining Erasmus+, reports that the UK-US tech deal is not going anywhere, and the Employment Rights Bill has finally been pushed through the Lords. So we're going to ask, does this mark the beginning of a more dynamic, muscular phase for the British government, or is it just a coincidental end-of-term flurry of activity? Alex, there have been plenty of complaints about the review from people who say it just doesn't go far enough, that it should be looking at specific incidents, and that it must take in interference in electoral events like the 2016 referendum. Why do you think the government have gone for a relatively narrow brief for this inquiry with Rycroft?
So I think what I saw online was, like I said, a bit of surprise that the government is actually doing the thing we've all been calling for, and a quick shifting to try and find why they're doing it wrong. And the reason they're doing it wrong is because it should absolutely look at people and look at the Brexit referendum, etc., etc. It doesn't go far enough. But it's a balance between what it does and how quickly it does it. In truth, if you looked at individuals or parties, it turns contentious instantly. It means you have a different evidential standard that you have to gather. It means you have to give people a right to reply. And the whole thing turns into a big show trial that's very politicized, then will take
a long time.
Probably will take us past the next general election, let alone report in 3 months' time. So if you take the view, which I do, that the first thing that needs to happen is to try and stop this money and this interference coming in, then speed is of the essence. So of course you're going to go for the route of least resistance to try and identify all the ways in which this stuff is basically coming into our system and block it. Now that doesn't mean there can't be further looking into things. And maybe one of the things that the review can do
recommend is
say,
to say,
you really need to look at this area or that electoral event. Baroness Arlene Foster, I should say, who was DUP leader at the time, was on Newsnight on Tuesday evening. And her dismissal of that dark money coming to them via a think tank for the Brexit referendum was outrageous.
Yeah.
Something like £432,000 from the Constitutional Research Council, who gave that money to the DUP because you were pro-Brexit. This was during the referendum time. And they were fined, the CRC was fined for not declaring that donation. The DUP declared it. But who was that 400 grand from? Who was giving the money to the CRC?
It was from the CLC.
But where did they get it from?
Well, we did all of our due diligence at that time.
And you may well have done, and you may have ticked all the boxes. But you still don't know where that money came from, do you?
Well, we know it came from CLC, and they were there as a legitimate platform to help bring about Brexit. And that's what we were helping to do at that time. Yeah. And it worked.
And of course, we had Dominic Grieve, who led the Russia Report investigation years ago that took far too long to be published by the then Johnson government. And was never really published fully. And he wrote at the time, we were surprised to discover government had not sought any evidence of whether similar interference had taken place in other democratic events, such as the 2016 EU referendum, and that there was effectively no information available, nor was there anything to suggest that special vigilance had been exercised at the time in the face of such possible interference. And if we do get our way and eventually a proper investigation into foreign interference in major political events, and notably, of course, that referendum, does come back and find that, yes, Brexit was manipulated and the vote was therefore not fair, 10 years on, which we will be in June 2026 from that moment, where does that leave the UK and its sort of constitutional question about its relationship with Europe?
I think Europe has long given up on that question in a way. I mean, and I agree with Alex here that I think this report, it's good it's not looking back because this would take forever. And I think there's so many hints and indications that that Russia, let's put it that way, played a major role in this, like it did in the Trump election. It will be very hard to prove. Yeah. There's a lot of dirty money involved. There's a lot of stuff that went on online that is very hard to prove the way that, the whole thing that Carol Cadwallader did. Yeah. There is so much indications. I think it's not really important for the EU whether this was influenced by Russia or not. It might be important in hindsight for Britain, but even there, we have other problems at the moment. And I think it's way more urgent to look at the Russian money that comes in now and the American money, which is not a very different beast anymore, sadly. And I think that's why this is really important. And also in combination with that, Starmer or someone from the government, I don't recall who exactly, also said again that they will now look into political party funding more closely. And I think that is really important.
And what we're hoping in the new year is that the elections bill will be brought forward by the government and will contain clauses around how much foreign money can be spent.
And that's really important because so far this is a Wild West. You can basically, it's not allowed to put party donations from an individual that is not living in Britain, but if you have a company, it doesn't really matter. It's just ludicrous. You can just basically, buy everything here, and it's cheap.
A couple of years ago, we had, I think Jenrick it was, through some dormant gym company, large amounts of money was being funneled to him, and all they say in return is it was declared in the usual way and it's completely legal. And they're right. It is. It's the actual system that allows it.
And that's more holes than a Swiss cheese.
Yeah. And that's a really dangerous thing in Britain because especially when it comes to money from America as well, Britain is very cheap compared to what they normally have to pay in America to get a party on side.
And of course, Germany has quite a lot of experience of this. The far-right AfD, long been accused pretty credibly of links to the Kremlin. An aide to their top MEP was convicted for spying for China this year, and the properties of multiple high officials have been raided during anti-corruption probes.
It's worse than that.
Tell us more, and what impact is it having on their polling?
None. And that's the biggest problem.
And why?
Yeah. Why? Yeah, well, if I knew that. No, but that is... The AfD has from the very beginning been extremely pro-Russia. Even in 2013-14, the then leader already supported Russia invading Crimea and went there. And it has been slowly building up. And interestingly, and that's different from Britain, the more radical they became, the AfD in Germany, and the more openly pro-Russia, the more popular they became. It had not only to do with that, but it didn't deter anybody from supporting them or declaring to vote for them. And there have been lots of open debates on this. I mean, we just had a parliamentary debate beginning of November where MPs from the centrist Conservative Party, from the Social Democrats, clearly said this is Russian sleeper agents, the AfD, and that's what they are. And there's the current deputy party leader and the foreign policy speaker called Markus Frohnmayer. He's been in Russia multiple times. There has been a leak already in 2019 from a Russian email that was discovered by an investigation through the German magazine The Spiegel, where the Russians said, we have him clearly completely under control. I mean, that has been all over the papers and it hasn't made a difference. And that is really shocking.
And in that debate, it caught my eye because Mark Heinrichmas, I think it was a ZDU MP, raised the fact that they were making a lot of requests for sensitive military data and sensitive security information. And he was suggesting they're passing it straight on to the Kremlin.
That's really interesting. There's another article from The Spiegel who did an investigation into that. And they found out that since 2020, the AfD has been trying to extract sensitive information on defense details in, and now hold your breath, 7,000 cases.
Wow.
I mean, that is crazy. I mean, in federal parliaments as well, of course. They've done a proper research into that. And that's way more than any other party. And that really makes you think, what do they need that for?
Yeah, and if you accept the current rhetoric that we will come to talk about in the second part, about Europe being in a pre-war state, really, it becomes a really serious thing, doesn't it? To have these people in your parliament with their hands on secret information.
This has always been the case, though, isn't it? That the bigger threat is more from internal division than the external agents, because all the external agents in the end have to do is pour fuel on the fires that are already burning. And they've been burning hotter and hotter across Europe for the last decade, if not more.
Yes.
What do you think? Do you think that Russia poses a greater threat than the weaknesses within the Western democracies themselves?
I mean, that goes hand in hand. Absolutely. I mean, they have been fueling that from the start. And I mean, this is, as I said, this has started in 2013 in Germany. Maybe earlier, we just don't know it, but this has been ongoing for years and years. And other than the other far-right parties in Europe, the AfD has become more and more extreme.
Quiet Riot. This is Jason Momoa, and I'll be your finance professor today. Welcome to Banking Smarter 101 with Chime. Bam! First lesson, sign up for Chime and set up direct deposit. You'll be joining millions of members banking fee-free. Second lesson, get cash back on eligible purchases while building credit and a higher APY on your savings. That's how you bank smarter this season. Fa-la-la-la-la, class dismissed. Join Chime today.
Chime is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services and a secure Chime Visa credit card provided by the Bancorp Bank N.A. or Stride Bank N.A. Members FDIC. Optional services and products may have fees or charges. Details at chime.com/fees-info. With a qualifying direct deposit, earn 1.5% cash back on eligible secure Chime Visa credit card purchases. On-time payment history may have a positive impact on your credit score. Results may vary. APY means annual percentage yield. Learn about credit building and more at chime.com.
Quiet Riot.
When we were discussing the regional federal elections, you were saying that because the AfD's major center of power is in former East Germany.
Yes, at the moment still.
Yeah.
It's too easy to say it's just Eastern Germany.
And they are culturally more Russophile, I guess, than the rest of Germany. Could that be one of the reasons why it doesn't have as much of an impact?
Russophile or Soviet? I
need to interfere briefly.
Interfere
I don't
fully.
think they are more Russophile. I mean, they have had worse experiences with being occupied by Russians in a way.
Yeah.
But I think they are more aware of the threat that Russia is. They're more frightened, maybe.
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
And don't want to get into conflict. Then they're more used to it. I mean, there's multiple layers to that. That would be a podcast on its own.
But I remember you also saying to me that there are older generations that there is a kind of longing for the
Yeah.
simplicity of
memory.
communism back then. And
I now remember that, and that's also true. As I said, there's many layers to it. There is this book, I think that's what we talked about like a few months ago, by this East German thinker and writer, Sascha Kowalczuk, that's called Freedom Shock. And he claims, he's an East German himself, and he claims more or less, I mean, I put it very bluntly and briefly here, but there is this kind of authoritarian character you have in these countries. I mean, like in Poland, you have a little bit the same thing. You have a very, very freedom-seeking part of the society, but you also have, especially within that older generation, you have this. It was safer and everything felt easier in under an authoritarian government because we didn't have to think so much and to sort out so much by ourselves. And this longing to be taken care of is something that certainly plays into that in former authoritarian countries. I mean,
I recognize that from Greece as well.
And in Poland, you've got on the one hand Donald Tusk, and then on the other hand, you've got Naomi.
A lot of the peace voters have the same mindset.
That split within the country.
That exact split. Naomi, back on the inquiry, what do we know about Sir Philip Rycroft, the former civil servant who's been put in charge of the review?
When the news broke, I reached out to quite a few people who work in this space and have been long pushing the government to do it, including regular on the show, Peter Gagan, and other people in the pro-democracy sector. And I haven't had anyone say anything other than good appointment. I think he'll do a very good job. This is the right man at the right time. Everyone seems to have pretty high regard for him and faith in his ability to be an honest broker.
Because he was the...
Dexeu.
Yeah, he was the top civil servant at the Department for Exiting the European Union. And I know from people that worked in that context that he's seen as playing a pretty straight bat.
Yeah. Nobody unusually had a negative word to say, but
that's
I
some
think
good news before Christmas.
But I think the focus has been, as you mentioned at the top, the government doing something everybody wanted and then complaining that it's not exactly what they wanted.
Well,
it's about the scope that people are moaning about, but not about him.
And we've discussed week after week.
Yeah.
You said a really smart, pithy thing that has really stayed with me. That sometimes when a government gets so unpopular, it's a way to kind of kill really good policies by getting them to announce it, because everyone just goes reflexively, nope, if they're doing it, it must be somehow deficient. The review has specifically, and I was surprised about this, that it's named social media astroturfing as one of the 3 headings that it will seriously look at, because they see it as seeking to influence Westminster opinion. And I thought that was a really interesting acknowledgement. Could this lead to government finally, like departments and ministers, getting off X?
Interestingly, I've noticed more government people on Blue Sky in the last month.
And
we've seen Starmer doing his TikTok and things like that. So I think they are beginning to wean themselves off the teat of Elon Musk. They definitely didn't need an inquiry to do that. You literally got the CEO, the owner of that company, speaking at far-right rallies, calling for the removal of the government and spreading malign misinformation about civil war in the UK being imminent. But also there are just fewer people on X now. So you are sort of farting into the wind.
And so many bots.
So many bots.
Like when I do socials for Best for Britain, it is so noticeable.
Yeah.
Like the first reaction you get to everything.
It's no longer an effective way for a government to communicate
Johnny
with
number,
people.
number, blue tick.
Yeah. And also, I mean, most accounts that are not right-wing are throttled now. I can see I still have 80,000 or whatever followers, but I get 5 likes. So there's something has happened. Yeah. It's completely senseless and pointless for me to post anything
And
there.
I think it is so much of it bot, because when we analyse at Best Written, we can tell when something has not been written by somebody with English as a first language, but they're posing as, Brian 78 from Kent. And it's like, but Brian would
support Portsmouth.
Right, exactly. It's just nonsense. So no, I mean, look, my view, I think they probably should have at least been on other platforms a lot longer ago, if not abandoned X entirely.
And I find it interesting in that with 2 things.
Yeah.
First of all, there's a membrane. So things do still go viral.
Yeah.
But there is kind of an inner membrane. So something will either get 3 likes or it will go viral.
That's true. Yeah, I was
if
just
it's not from the right-wing space, basically. So it's obviously like the immediate attempt is to throttle. But if something actually has a life and lots of clicks, then the algorithm gives up on it.
Also, if some bots get into it, then sometimes. I mean, I just did a remark on the German Chancellor Merz being quite assertive now against Russia, and suddenly this thing went nuts because some bots started to go in there early on.
It feels like a weird intermediate situation where there's a barrier, and once you breach it, actually things go normally viral. The second thing is that the reaction from the very obvious reform supporting bots recently to anything negative posted about reform, especially if it goes viral, like the first 20 responses will be from obvious bots, and the sentiment will be, don't care, voting reform anyway. And I don't know whether that betrays a kind of insecurity and brittleness in them trying to spread that message that don't care, I'm voting reform anyway.
And Yaxley Lennon, Tommy Robinson, is really seeking to puncture Farage's lead this week. I don't know if you've seen, but he's been out highly critical of Farage and reform.
I mean, he's planning to sue him, apparently.
Well, indeed, and Elon Musk will back it all. So
for ruining his good reputation.
I mean, after his Christmas carol gathering really flopped really big time. I mean, we were there. It was really, I mean, just a few hundred people, and he looked really miserable. I mean, maybe he now needs another fight somewhere else.
Maybe.
Say hello to the all-new Alexa Plus and see how Alexa can do so much more for you. Need tickets to see your favorite artist? Craving your comfort restaurant? Just sit back, relax, and talk naturally. Alexa's on it. It learns your style, anticipates what's next, and makes it happen across Echo, Fire TV, and more. Learn more at amazon.com/new Alexa.
So the announcement around the review, it names really 3 countries. Russia, to a lesser extent China and Iran, as those who are seeking to adversely influence our politics. Cheeky question, having seen that national security strategy from the White House earlier this month, shouldn't we also be talking about money and influence flowing from supposed friends like the USA? I mean, they are openly saying that they're looking to adversely interfere in our politics.
Absolutely. But that's as long as we are bridge builders in Britain. This is a difficult thing to do for Starmer, obviously. But of course we should. And I mean, in Europe now, during this gathering in Berlin this week, Merz was very clear, the German Chancellor, that Pax Americana is over, he said. So, and he's a very ardent transatlanticist, or used to be. Many European countries, and especially Germany, has been much clearer than Starmer. And I'm really wondering how long he's going to tread between the two, or able to be treading between the two, because this will get more and more difficult.
Again, I remember talking to you just after the German general election, and I asked you, who's Friedrich Merz? And the first sentence you said to me is he's a huge NATO supporter and transatlanticist.
Absolutely. That's why it's so astonishing that he really completely flipped sides and is extremely clear about what's going on now.
That religious right money has been flowing into the UK for a very long time already. And Reform UK now effectively has its own church. It has a church willing to host it. It's notionally still, allied to the Church of England, but when you read their website and their interpretation of the liturgy, this is very, very clearly importing of that Anabaptist tradition with a very, very political bent to it.
Is this the Sarah Pochin photo opportunity?
Yeah. So
that was so weird.
So weird. And a brilliant writer called Catherine Stewart has published books about all of this in America and how the religious right money has flowed into the MAGA movement and how it is not just coming to Europe, it's here and it's in London.
But the question for me is, I mean, I've always seen, I mean, whenever I've done something on the Church of England or Brits and religion, I mean, they're so lukewarm on that. I can't really see this working here.
But
is that naive?
It's for sure a missing element. I mean, we've said so many times that the two saving graces in terms of finding it slightly more difficult to introduce that kind of MAGA fellowship here are that religion is not...
It's just not a thing here.
In the same position, and guns.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean they're not going to go for those two things.
Question is, how successful can that be?
Well, but even if it's 2% successful, 5% successful...
But it's not just about bringing people on board, because those organisations offer a route
for money.
Exactly that, though. That's the thing. That's the back door. And the money will flow from Russia via those American organisations straight into this country.
And London is the most religious part of the UK.
Is it?
By far, because it has so many immigrants.
Because of the immigration.
And there are more and more young people now, particularly young women, beginning to attend more spiritual functions, going to church services. And I'm not surprised by that, because I was really struck by the generation below me really getting into horoscopes in a way my generation never had, and this seeking of superstition to answer the big questions about the human condition finds difficult to grapple with. I'm not entirely surprised that the next kind of evolutionary step of that for young people is then into something a bit more organised religious.
I mean, that's something I just wanted to bring in to contradict myself again, because there's one thing that might work, that the younger generation is sort of, it's not so much religion, but it's getting religious looking for a tribe. Yeah. And I've just done a long interview in the north of England with a priest there who said this whole American evangelical stuff is sort of around there as well. And there's money in it, but it's more a youth movement that try to capture them like that. And there is a need and a longing to belong to something. And that's what they offer. And that could, for a younger generation, maybe be a way in. And
Isn't it interesting how when we change the language around this debate, everything starts to seem a little bit more acceptable in some ways? If you talk about need and longing and the desire to belong, all of a sudden the threat element comes away. Whereas when we talk about the danger from external players and external agencies, and we're talking about exactly the same organisations.
But the two are related.
Absolutely.
They're absolutely inextricably linked. Not to toot my own horn again, but so right now I'm writing the next series of Podyssey, which is out in January, and the episode on Prometheus. If you look at ethnographers, they find a direct link between times of stress in a population and actively looking for what they call savior gods, whether they are Apollo or Ra or Jesus or whatever. Basically, when populations are well-fed and comfortable, they tend towards education, reason, science. And when they're stressed, they tend towards religion.
Supernatural saviors, not political saviors.
Yes, because if you have pain inflicted on you and you feel you don't have any control over it, you look to the heavens and you say, help me.
Yeah, and that's where the whole polarization that is going on is feeding into this as well. Yeah.
And so in a weird way, warning about external dangers only increases the need of a population to look for those metaphysical solutions. Anyway, we've also had, and we must mention this, a bit of a Christmas stocking filler in the form of an announcement, which I must say was fully predicted by you, Naomi, 2 weeks ago, that the UK is rejoining Erasmus+. Can we welcome this as good news?
Yes.
Or no?
Yes. Lovely, wonderful news, joyous news. And just before we came in to record the show today, Nick Thomas-Symonds, the minister tasked with negotiating our reset with the EU, has come to talk to Parliament after having had meetings with Maroš Šefčovič, his counterpart, last week. And he's made some pretty bold claims that not only have we signed the deal to rejoin Erasmus+, meaning that British students can participate from January 2027. So got a 13-month wait, but way better than nothing at all. So delighted about that. But also that the emissions trading deal is basically done.
Oh, excellent.
And will be signed, more details next week. So devil in the detail, let's wait and see. And that the SPS agreement, the agri-food deal, will be done by the time of the next summit. Now that feels like a very stretched target to me. However, all signalling good news and momentum in the right direction.
I mean, the year in between may not be a bad thing. also to wean people off the current Turing scheme.
And exactly. And you've got to have paid, like, the deadline to sort of be paying into it is this January in order for the next funding cycle.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay, so if I can return to your original question, this flurry of activity, does it feel to you as if the attempted multiple times rebrand of the government or refocus of the government or reset of the government is finally working and we're seeing a slightly more assertive administration, or is it just a seasonal coincidence?
I mean, I think it's partly coincidental, but partly also because these things take time. I mean, to negotiate with the EU famously takes a lot of time. And if these SPS and other things get really done that quickly, that is relatively quick for EU, for the EU and the negotiation with the EU. And also Erasmus wasn't an easy negotiation. I mean, we've seen other negotiations like SAFE falling through and breaking down. It's not... I mean, it can still be picked up at some point, but these things are complicated. And I think a lot of the things that Starmer has started a year ago are slowly now coming to fruition. But these things take time, and it's partly coincidental, I think. Partly, I feel they are waking up a bit more to the danger of Farage. I think that's something that has changed in tone. They have been clearer about this. Starmer has been more assertive in Parliament, attacking him. They have a little bit dampened down this whole thing. Immigration is a massive issue for now. So I feel they're trying to edge to something a bit more confrontative again with Farage. I mean, you can just hope that this stays like that. But the other, let's say, positive news we've been announcing here today, I think are just happening now because these things couldn't be done much faster.
But I guess also in terms of comms, the last couple of weeks have felt like the government has taken the agenda by the scruff of the neck. Even when people disagree, they're still talking about the thing the government is doing. And that has notably crowded out.
I sense the hand of Darren Jones in all of this. So he's been moved from Chief Secretary to the Treasury into number 10 to look at all of this and to really start to get control of the grid and operationalize Campbell. But he's got this kind of hybrid role. And he's a smart guy and he's a good communicator and he gets what good comms is and how it needs to be. And even today he's been saying, look, maybe giving an exclusive to a RAG is not the way to do good government comms. So maybe we're going to experiment with launching something on TikTok as the first place that government announces it. So he's really trying to think about how to own that agenda. And I think what we're feeling now is some of that. But look, I also think on a day when doctor strikes are going ahead during the middle of a really terrible flu outbreak, they needed to push some good news stories out as well. So,
But the point is they have done it successfully.
Last year they would not have.
Exactly. 2 months ago, 6 months ago, they wouldn't have.
And I'm sure that the pressure of various leadership campaigns being organised against you will also make you come out sharp-elbowed, Call to action, Alex. What are we going to ask people to do?
It's not going to be a political or a self-serving one, but this time of year is incredibly difficult for people sleeping rough, not just because of the really sharp temperatures, but also because I think there's a kind of devastating psychological impact. First of all, seeing people spending a lot of money when you have nothing, and also the increased isolation you feel at times when everyone else is surrounded by friends and family. So can I ask people to donate to sponsor a room for a young person through Centrepoint? Or if you don't have the money, but have a little bit of time, you can actually still volunteer to Crisis, who organize Christmas dinner events. Now, you won't have time to be vetted for a kind of front of house role, but there's loads of stuff that doesn't require that, like wrapping presents or prepping kitchen, chopping vegetables
Cleaning
or whatever. There are things that you can still volunteer a little bit of time for. So if you've got any spare time or any spare money, I would ask you to think of people who are on the street right now, because it's a really, really difficult time. I mean, I remember I was homeless just before Christmas is when it happened, and it was the vicious, vicious thing to be going through at a time when everyone else is sort of reading cracker jokes. It really was, it made you feel very, very low. So.
Well, thank you, Alex. And we will leave a link in the show notes for everybody who would like to and is able to help Centrepoint and Crisis.
Quiet Riot. This episode is brought to you by Netflix. So Netflix is basically Santa this year. 2 NFL games on Christmas Day, streaming live. At 1 p.m. Eastern, it's Cowboys, Commanders. Then at 4:30, you've got Lions, Vikings. Midwest football, playoff stakes, and probably some snow. Watching holiday football is a tradition the whole family can enjoy. Open some gifts, grab some food, settle in, and watch NFL Live on Netflix this Christmas Day.
It has been several days of intense negotiations between Ukraine and the Americans, facilitated by Chancellor Merz in Berlin. We are told good progress has been made, which is a pretty weird thing in itself if you stop to think about it for even a moment. An ostensible ally is negotiating with an ally, facilitated by a third ally, about accepting a peace plan that the other side of that war, the ostensible adversary, Russia, has already rejected. This is followed by the latest EU summit currently going on in Brussels, the main objective of which is to shift the position of yet more allies on using frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine's defense, assets now permanently frozen after the EU acted under Article 122 to effectively remove the 6-monthly threat of an Orban veto. The mood music is one of imminent threat. NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte told the world last week that European NATO members are Russia's next target. Military brass in the UK is warning of a lack of preparedness. European capitals are whispering the word conscription. And the head of MI6 says that we are now operating in a space between peace and war.
Alongside the grinding war, Russia is testing us in the grey zone with tactics that are just below the threshold of war. It's important to understand their attempts to bully, fearmonger and manipulate because it affects us all. I'm talking about cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, drones buzzing, airports and bases, aggressive activity in our seas above and below the waves, state-sponsored arson and sabotage, propaganda and influence operations that crack open and exploit fractures within societies. Across the globe, we are now confronting not one single danger, but an interlocking web of security challenges, military, technological, social, ethical even, each shaping the other in complex ways. We are now operating in a space between peace and war. Institutions which were designed in the ashes of the Second World War are being challenged, new blocs and identities forming and alliances reshaping.
Is this Europe finally internalizing the fact that Ukraine really is the front line of a much bigger war, one in which the US is likely to declare indifference at best? Or is it a coordinated PR wave following a realization that people across the continent really have not fully grasped the gravity of the situation and the sacrifices which may have to be made? Annette, surprisingly, the person who seems to be leading the Starmer-Macron-Merz triangle through this latest phase is the German Chancellor. Does even the fact that I find that surprising tell the story about Germany's flaccidness in the last few years?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Germany has been on a long journey. If you look at when Scholz announced the Zeitenwende, when was that, 2022? I don't even remember. I think that was just after the invasion, the start of the invasion of Ukraine. And he announced that in a weirdly defensive way, and nothing really happened at first. I mean, he did put some money out there, but not enough to, and the German military was in a terrible state. Merz has, from the very start, you can criticize him on many things, especially on domestic policy. He is very often too fast, too hot-headed, doesn't think things through. But on foreign policy and when it comes to the threat of Russia, he has been very clear from the very start. And he's really now on the forefront, I think, in Europe, because also there's nobody else, really. I mean, Macron is deeply damaged at the moment politically.
And Macron started out that whole thing by being like, I'll be able to talk to Putin.
Yeah, but that didn't really work. Yeah, no, exactly. And so Merz has now taken over because I think he sees and clearly and correctly sees the threat that is out there. And he's given a few really remarkably speeches in the last 2 weeks, especially last Saturday. He was in Munich and did talk about the situation being very similar to 1938, where Hitler said he needs to have the Sudetenland, which was a chunk of Czechoslovakia, which was German-speaking. And then once he would have that, he would stop the war. And then there was this famous appeasement meeting with Chamberlain in Munich that went, in hindsight, terribly wrong, basically comparing Putin directly to Hitler. In Germany. Yeah. So, I mean, that was very strong as a statement.
He said, if Ukraine falls, Russia will not stop.
Correct.
Just as the Sudetenland was not enough in 1938, Putin will not stop.
And that is something that was quite strong and really resonates with Germans because they do remember this very clearly. So that was good, I thought, because there is an urgent need to raise awareness of the threat, even in Germany. I mean, here it's even more so, I think. When I'm in Britain, I always think, okay, fine, we're far away and nobody talks about it really. The sense of threat is much higher in Germany. But nevertheless, if you look at talking of conscription at the polls, especially amongst younger Germans, 61-65%, depending on the poll, are totally against that and don't want to fight.
No, I know. And I've got friends here who are third-generation migrants from various parts of Eastern Europe, and they've been hammering away at their parents and grandparents to get, the Polish passport, the German passport, whatever, because they want to now skip the queue when they go off to Benidorm.
And suddenly...
But now they're like, hold on, actually... I've got 3 teenage sons or 4 teenage nephews, and they're like, maybe we'll just stick with the British one for a little while longer.
But that's also an illusion.
They're getting really worried.
Yeah, but the illusion is that you're in a different situation in Britain.
Yeah.
I mean, Britain is in an even worse situation, and I think it's no coincidence that it's not just the head of MI6 this week, but also the head of the Royal Navy. I think. I mean, there were several people who, in a concerted or coordinated kind of campaign, said, "Listen, guys, we're in a pre-war situation." So this has to sink in here as well. I mean, otherwise it will be very difficult for the military to do what it needs. I think Britain is not in a very different situation.
There's a very good episode of our sister podcast at the moment, Behind the Lines, which I found, terrifying. Speculating, yes, but in an educated way, that the devices that blow up the power cables and the internet cables, etc., underwater are probably already placed. It's just a question of when do I push the button to cause massive disruption. And we have seen, actually, Germany say that the mayhem at the airports earlier
that was clearly
this month was definitely
and
Poland.
Sweden has done these emergency text messages like our government has done, but telling people to make sure that they've got certain provisions.
Denmark as well.
Yeah, right. So other countries are much more alert to how imminent this kind of threat is.
I think it's a weird thing to think there is this little channel in between us and nothing can happen. We can just float away as an island, and it's not the case really, especially as this doesn't have to be a war with tanks. I mean, there's other war types now, and that can very easily reach the Britain as well.
I mean, that's a way of framing what's going on very differently. The idea that this war has been going on for a long time already. It's a financial war, and it's a digital war, and it's not something that's going to happen tomorrow. It's something that's happening right now, and it's something that happened yesterday.
That's exactly what the head of MI6 was saying. When she says we are in this state between war and peace, what she was saying is that there is stuff going on that is already entirely hostile.
Yeah. One other thing on her speech, because it was an eyebrow raiser, but you can imagine that what she's telling us, what she's telling the press, is just a fraction of a % of what they know and what's going on.
I'm not sure it's a reasonable assumption, but you could also say that because there is this complacency, you say 60-odd% are against conscription. That's a pipe dream for the UK, where it was 78% and only 12% for at the last YouGov
Really?
poll.
I always thought it was more German.
But I tell you what, when we look at conscription last time around, Second World War, the older generations sacrifice money. I think that is driving a huge part of that. And that's what this younger generation is saying. It's like, we give all the time. It is always our futures being gambled away. It is always our consequences of there probably not being an NHS intact by the time we retire, the climate having gone to mess, retirement age being about 95. we gave up a huge amount during COVID to protect all of you. Where is it coming from in the other direction?
Well,
so if you wanted to pick up arms, then,
as the only draft dodger in this group, I would guess,
You and Trump have got quite a lot in common.
When I came here, we have nothing in common, thank you. When I came here, it was because Greece had become an unlivable country in many, many ways. Professionally, it was impossible. The state was a Kafkaesque nightmare. Public services were in a state of collapse. Everything worked by, I have a cousin who knows someone or a little brown envelope of money. It was in a disgusting state. And so when I made the decision to leave Greece and settled here and studied here and then was offered a job here, and Greece came round and said, now that you finished your studies, you must come back and do the army unpaid for 2 years, my reaction was fuck off.
Yeah.
Precisely because of that reason.
Where was the contract?
That was my calculation. It's like, what have you offered to me? To ask me now to sacrifice 2 of the best years of my life, stole my career in order to come and look over a river somewhere in a border where nothing happens. It was a time of peace also, which played into that. But you're absolutely right. It needs to be a deal between the country and young people.
So much as there is a huge difference in the way warfare is waged, boots on the ground and meat grinders are still very much a key part of it. And in the end, you don't take cities and towns and villages.
They're a bigger part of it. Well, but that's precisely the point. They're a bigger part of it on the side of Russia because, and I have to keep reminding myself this, Russia's objectives are very different. Russia wants to take ground. To take ground, you need people. To defend ground, you need people, but you don't need as many people as Russia are using at the moment. Part of what emerged from the Berlin meetings is this new 10-point plan of defense cooperation between Ukraine and Germany, including joint ventures like the establishment of Europe's first industrial-scale drone factory. It is significant.
Ukraine was not the leading military force in Europe. And within the space of a few short years, it is now, without question, the most professional, well-equipped, well-trained, largest defence force in Europe. And their drone production is far superior to anything that we've seen elsewhere. And so actually the tables have really turned and it is them who are going to have to help us get up to speed with actually all of this. So I think it is extremely significant in that context. Who a few short years ago would have thought that the large G7 nations within Europe would have something to learn from Ukraine when it came to all of this tech. And so I think it's marvellous.
It's a recognition that they're the experts now.
And I think that is very much to be applauded. I don't know the detail of how much will go on in terms of the production and exactly what's going to be produced and where. But I think this is all part of drawing Ukraine ever closer into the sphere of influence of the EU. So I think it's really interesting that the big, and Met's chief among them, the big players in Europe are doing their level best to say, come to us and we will.
Well, so after that press conference, Zelensky went and met with the other European leaders as well, who had gathered in Berlin basically to have a huddle after the thing. And they issued a joint statement which proposed a European-led multinational force with US support to help enforce a potential peace agreement in Ukraine. I mean, that can't not mean boots on the ground, right?
I mean, the whole statement that came out of that summit is so vague. I mean, it's more like trying to keep the thing playing, the music playing.
Yeah.
But if you look at it, it says, we need peace troops there. It does mean boots on the ground. But then whenever you look into it, and I've read it carefully, it says, with significant support of the US. But as it's this famous backstop Keir Starmer always talked about, that he will send people in there. And France said the same thing, but only if there is a backstop, whatever that means, some kind of security guarantees from the US. As we all know, I mean, Trump is completely unreliable on that. So you can just as well forget about that. And that's what I meant. I think the big danger in all of this is you will not be able to secure a peace deal without boots on the ground.
Yeah.
And that will have to be European boots on the ground, because the US has completely ruled that out. Poland also has ruled it out for other reasons, because they need their soldiers.
Because they feel insecure on their own border.
They just can't do that. And so it's basically France and Britain at the moment. In Germany, you will not get the support easily.
No.
That's why Merz is sort of trying to show up this sense of urgency. But that is the big question. Who will secure a peace deal?
European leaders must know this, right?
Of course they
must
know.
know
Two things
that
going
even
simultaneously happening hand in hand here. And one is the announcement last week with the very beige language. Now, we will expect beige language when it comes to putting boots on the ground. The European Union is not going to go full Trump on the idea of keep your planes out of our airspace. They're going to use the blandest, most around the houses language they possibly can. It'll be peacekeeping forces, there'll be enforcement agencies. And that's what we'd expect from a diplomatic perspective. But on the other side, if you look at where money is going to be spent, which tells us a different story, that's where the German drone factory comes in, because that sends a message that the era of the peace dividend is now over.
Yeah.
So we're seeing diplomacy being very careful and diplomatic and bland, as we'd expect, but we're seeing some genuine, they're talking about lingering munitions. These drones are not, this is not cameras, these are designed, this is lethal weaponry.
I guess my question is, European leaders, they must know that Trump's guarantee, a US guarantee right now, is not worth anything. I mean, the idea that Trump would stand shoulder to shoulder with Europe if you got him to sign a document, it's ludicrous. He will decide that morning whether it suits him or not to be on what side. So they must know that. So why still this dance, this performance?
Because Europe is nowhere near being ready to support Ukraine.
So is it to just play for time?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you look, and they've just chaired a bilateral German-British defense conference last week in Berlin. If you talk to militaries and generals, I mean, the state of the British army especially is really not very good. And there is no money, there is no people. Germany has money now because Merz released these 500 billion. And they are starting to invest a lot, but they're not ready. They're nowhere near being ready to support Ukraine the way they need to. So I think it's mostly about playing for time. And because NATO NATO doesn't really exist anymore. I mean, if you look at this joint statement they signed in Berlin, it just sort of implores. I mean, there's all these clauses with strong support from the US, with some, but they don't even mention Article 5 really, because everybody knows it's not really there.
So is part of what's happening also to avoid being the ones that scupper the deal, to get to a place where they make Putin reject it?
Yes, of course. But he will reject it.
Of course he will.
And I mean, it's pretty clear.
But you know what I mean? It's part of the theater of what we're seeing, because really that's what it is, is to say we are reasonable. We are the reasonable side. They're not the reasonable side.
But it's also playing for time, because at the same time, the biggest and most important decision is this week, towards the end of the week, this big EU summit in Brussels, where they will decide whether they will use this money. They have frozen these Russian assets. You've talked about that on last Sunday here on the show, whether they will use that to put it against the debt to give Ukraine the money it needs, because Ukraine is bleeding out money. It really needs...
Come on! Just do it!
And Merz yesterday evening said that it's 50-50 whether they will agree on that, because, that is the big problem with EU, and that's why I slightly disagree with Naomi on that the Ukraine is safer within the EU as a EU member. The EU is not unanimously supporting Ukraine anymore. And that will be a big issue. They have already used emergency powers to freeze these Russian assets indefinitely to be able to get this loan at all if they decide on it. But they can't do that all the time. But I think this is really important what happens this week, end of the week in Brussels, because if they can't agree on setting up that loan against these frozen assets from Russia, which was, by the way, a Merz idea. He's been pushing that mostly, and it would be very bad for him politically if he couldn't get that through. If they can't agree on that, I mean, that would be a major capitulation of EU. If they can't even agree on taking up a loan together, the main problem now is whether Italy, for example, supports Merz or tracks back. And you can absolutely take it for granted that the US administration is calling every single one of those Europeans because they don't want that to happen. So this is a big question. And if they don't do that, just to finish that thought, I mean, if they can't even agree on a 200 billion loan to support Ukraine, does anybody believe they will send boots or soldiers into Ukraine? I mean, then they can as well go home.
I agree.
I mean, in this context, how disappointing is it that the safe
extremely.
Basically, you can't be going out all over the place and announcing that we're at war and then acting in the same way you were acting when
that's what I mean.
You were talking about fishing quotas.
Right. Look, Europe has never wanted Putin to win. It has just simply never been able to agree how to defeat him. It is worth remembering that SAFE is not everything. It's only, relatively modest proportion of all EU defence projects. But look, it is depressing. It's maddening. And if they can make all this wonderful progress with the cultural stuff like Erasmus, what is that all for if these young people are going to end up cannon fodder because we haven't managed to get our act together? So it is depressing and I am frustrated by it. But I'm told it is not the end of negotiations.
That's what I wanted to say. I mean, as everything with the EU, there always is another deadline and it's not the end.
So one last thing, this idea of Ukraine joining the EU by the 1st of January 2027, I mean...
No, never.
Wouldn't it turn like the whole accession process upside down? Like, how would a country like Albania react?
Yeah, exactly. The whole West Balkan.
Through the process for 10 years.
I don't want to be quoted here, but everything is possible, but I can't see that really.
But I can see something else. I can see an outer layer where the UK and the Ukraine are both much more integrated into some kind of concentric circle around the...
I mean, that would be the main solution probably to find a two-tier
a Switzerland-style arrangement where you do have...
But a proper membership within a year is,
that's not going to happen. And Albania have been incredibly patient for a decade doing everything they were meant to do. The goalposts keep shifting. And while they have historically been an incredibly Europhilic population, that is dwindling over time with their frustration.
Right, so Annette, I was going to offer you a call to action, but given the enormity of what we have discussed in this second part, it's probably a little unfair to ask listeners to bring about world peace a week out from Christmas. So how about a telly recommendation?
The 3-part documentary by David Dimbleby on the monarchy is fantastic. It's on BBC and the iPlayer now. The 3rd episode came out, I think, yesterday or today. I don't know. It's really fascinating because, I don't know whether you've seen David Dimbleby in his old days when he was the royal presenter of the BBC. He's sort of royalty himself in a way. And he's now sitting there doing a 3-part documentary asking, do we really need the monarchy? And he really, really goes deep into finances. And I was quite astonished to see the BBC making such a documentary. And I thought it was fascinating.
They'll probably have to take it off iPlayer.
It's really, they might get into trouble. I was really surprised, I must say, because it's really
quick. Download it before.
Sounds great. We'll drop a link in there.
That was really worth a watch and is worth a watch.
Good.
Quiet Riot. Now, it's time for our weekly sunbeam of smashingness in a regular look at a genuine good news story. It's time to grin and share it.
Good news is welcome to me. Bad news is hell come to me. Good news. I want good news.
What have you got for us, Naomi?
Well, I've got such a lovely one this week, Kenny. It's unusual because today it's possibly the best one of the year. It's you at home, all of you. So a huge, huge, huge thank you from us to everyone who took our call to action last week and sent a gift to the children at the East Manchester Academy who will otherwise have just gone without any gifts at all this Christmas. More than 400 of you have sent toys and games and clothes. And the lovely, wonderful Steph, who was running the project, has a little message for you all.
Hi, this is Steph Lonsdale from the East Manchester Academy. I just wanted to say thank you so much to anyone who bought a gift from our Amazon wish list. We have had literally hundreds, and I cannot tell you how much it means to our school community and how much it will mean to the individual children who will be receiving those gifts. The kindness of strangers has been overwhelming, to be honest, and thank you.
Quiet Riot listeners, thank you all for being such gorgeous and generous people.
Oh, thank you, Naomi. Listeners, please give yourselves a huge round of applause. Kindness, especially from strangers, creates a wave of goodwill that can spread in unexpected and really very wonderful ways. It's so easy to forget that.
And that's it from another of our political pantos. And indeed, this is the last main show of the year. But fret not, we'll still be putting out content throughout the festive period, so keep your eyes peeled for some very exciting episodes, landing at all the regular times and a couple of bonus ones in between.
Ooh. Thank you for being with us and for cheering and booing in all the right places. If you fancy chipping in the price of a matinee stall's ticket, head over to ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod, where you can do just that.
We'll be back on Sunday for the last Sunday School of 2025. So until then, enjoy ploughing through the last few days of work of the year and keep on quietly rioting.
We love you very, very much. Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simone Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese.
Quiet Riot. I have to say, the whole age verification thing has meant that I have watched less porn. No, genuinely.
And you can just do it on a VPN.
No, but it's a faff. It's a faff.
I think
depends how desperate one is.
Well, obviously there are ways around it, but what I'm saying is it stopped me doing it
like habitually.
Sort of randomly.
And everybody is tired. All of the Ukrainians I know they've just kind of had enough. It's been remorseless. We've seen a massive uptick in bombing by Russia of Ukrainian cities over the New Year period: Kiev, Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, Dnipro, and so on.
I'm Arthur Snell. I spent 2 decades as a British diplomat in places like Iraq, Afghanistan and Yemen. I ran the International Prevent programme for a while, and now I'm the host of the Behind the Lines podcast, where we get the leading experts on global issues, from Argentina to Zimbabwe, from places you hear a lot about like Ukraine and the Middle East, to things that we barely hear mentioned like Myanmar. My guests are informed, insightful and invaluable guides to what's happening in this crazy world.
Yeah, hi, I'm Christopher Steele.
I'm James Barr.
I'm Gaia Vince.
It's very, very clear that the amount of food being distributed from these centres is not enough.
I'm Dr. Emma Bryan.
I'm Dan Kazita.
Like a dog that chases a bus, you know, and then one day it catches the bus, it just runs headlong into that. What the hell do we do now? The sound of a dog actually catching up with a bus.
What we need to be talking about is fascism and how to challenge fascist ideas.
My name's Helena von Bismarck.
So I'm Zoe Gardner.
It's left Xi Jinping with a lifetime conviction that chaos is to be avoided at all costs.
I'm Emily Thornbury. I'm the Labour MP for Islington South and Finsbury, and I am now the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee.
I'm Romy Kukratsky. I'm the managing editor of the New Voice of Ukraine.
I don't think the West have any wish for Ukraine to win, because Ukrainian win means a collapse of Russia. What they want to bring balance back.
I say to my students, I think this is a moment very similar to when I was a student. The Cold War was ending, the Berlin Wall was falling, and it seemed like a moment of immense opportunity, but it was also a moment in which everything was changing quite dramatically.
Behind the Lines is your essential guide to the international scene. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.